Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole speaks out against the Supreme Court's ruling that the federal carbon tax is constitutional. The UCP is spending millions of dollars more to help alleviate wait times for CT and MRI scans. And we hear from Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, who shares his concerns over the rise of COVID-19 cases in our city.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says the federal carbon tax hurts Canadians. The Supreme Court of Canada ruled yesterday that the levy is constitutional. O'Toole says a nationwide carbon tax from the Liberals will throw even more Canadians out of work.
We've seen billions of dollars leave Canada and go to the United States. So we need to be smarter. We need policies focused on job creation and partnering with provinces and emitters to lower emissions without losing jobs. That will be our priority. And Michael, we're in the process of creating a platform on that for the next election. Canadians are finding an affordability crunch in Ontario and Quebec and BC in particular. So we need to focus on regrowing our economy and having a climate change plan that will get our emissions down without pushing jobs out of Canada.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says his government is looking over its options after the Supreme Court ruling on the carbon tax. Kenney says the guiding principle will be to impose the least cost and hardship on consumers and Alberta industries. Ottawa imposed its carbon price on Alberta last year after the UCP cancelled the province's own carbon tax in 2019. The Premier says Alberta has been a North American leader in taxing large greenhouse gas emitters. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf chimed in on how disappointed he was with the ruling from the Supreme Court of Canada, saying that the federal carbon tax is in fact constitutional.
We were elected on our promise to Albertans to challenge the constitutionality of Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. And Alberta wasn't alone in this fight. We were joined by provinces right across Canada, Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and New Brunswick, and they stood with us, representing almost 80% of Canadians. And we have done what we could. We won a great victory here in Alberta at the Supreme Court, but we didn't get the same outcome federally. And now we're going to see lasting impacts to our farmers, especially as they use tractors to cultivate and produce the food that we eat, which means that literally every single Canadian will feel the impact of this increase in costs at a taxpayer level for many years to come.
We will hear how politicians from other prairie provinces feel about the Supreme Court ruling on the carbon tax. That's coming up later in our broadcast. The province of Alberta announced it is going to be offering more critical housing support for Albertans. Officials say the rent supplement program is being tweaked to include a long-term benefit for families in need and a new temporary benefit for working Albertans or those who are underemployed. The redesigned program will offer support for 11,600 households. In a statement released today, Minister of Seniors and Housing Josephine Pon had this to say: "This past year reinforced the importance of safe, stable, and affordable housing. These changes will help the program meet the needs of Albertans now and in the future." Officials say the rent assistance benefit will reopen on April the 1st. Now, the opposition NDP sent out a reminder that the UCP cut rental assistance by 24% in last year's budget, along with housing maintenance by $53 million. The UCP also announced today that thanks to an extra $33 million commitment in its latest budget, there will be less wait times for both CT scans and MRIs. Government officials say extra funding will support AHS to perform up to an additional 50,000 CT scans and up to 45,000 more MRI scans throughout the province this year and next. They say this will significantly reduce the wait times. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says these tests are vital for Albertans.
Albertans rely on these tests to diagnose serious health problems like cancer, stroke, and MS. And they're used to diagnosis of a huge range of conditions, from brain trauma to arthritis as well. Let me say first that patients in emergency and admitted to hospital get CT scans and MRIs quickly. Emergency scans are generally done within 24 hours. But patients who are not in hospital are waiting far too long, and it's delaying their treatment and putting their health at risk.
Government officials say the additional $33 million will augment the $1 billion Alberta already spends annually on diagnostic imaging. Easter is coming up next weekend. Now, the Nordbridge Senior Centre in Lethbridge held a drive-by lunch with an Easter theme today to brighten the days of many seniors in our city. As Micah Quinn explains, the centre is looking forward to a time when they can finally have members back in the building, but for now, they're thankful they can socially distance and talk with seniors.
Staff, volunteers, and even the Easter Bunny were out in full force today, serving almost 200 members and guests in a drive-by lunch at Nordbridge.
It's just a fun event we're doing. Anyone can get a meal for $11, and they just pull into a parking spot and we bring out their meal to them.
Kern says that with the pandemic, this is the closest thing that the centre can offer to members and seniors in the community.
It's definitely helping with everyone's mental health, having that kind of fun aspect to just picking up food on, because everyone needs to eat, but we just try and make it as fun as possible.
Mike Bennett has been volunteering at Nordbridge for 25 years, and he recently became a member himself.
Behind the scene, I have a great time doing it. It makes me feel great. It makes me feel useful and wanted and needed. So it's really it's good for my health. It keeps me going. I don't sit and watch TV all day this way or sleep more than I need to. And this way, I think if I keep active, I'll be healthy. And I hope when I get that I'm not able to be healthy, somebody else will take up volunteering and I'll be able to be served.
Bennett says that he's looking forward to being able to come back when Nordbridge is fully reopened to members. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Interfaith Food Bank and the Lethbridge Food Bank have received a generous amount of cash thanks to the refundable bottle program from Green's Pop Shop and GPS Container Depot. Over $32,000 will be split in half for the two food banks. The executive director of the Interfaith Food Bank, Danielle McIntyre, says this money will go a long way with helping out the less fortunate in our city.
For me, it's surprising at how successful the campaign has been. It started back in the early COVID days, and community members have just been really faithful with bringing in their recyclables to benefit the food banks. This volume of cash coming into the food bank in a time when we're really struggling to make sure that everybody gets what they need is wonderful. We've been very fortunate to have great community support, which allows us to keep our doors open, and sizable cash contributions like this are helpful for so many things.
McIntyre says that the bottle drive will continue to run and residents can donate at all GPS Container Depot locations or at either food bank. 3 cases of COVID-19 have been confirmed and identified at a school in West Lethbridge. The Holy Spirit School Division says the infections are at Father Leonard Van Tighem School. All close contacts have been notified and are quarantining. The division did not say if the infected individuals were students or staff. As of Thursday, there were 13 active cases within the division, resulting in around 365 students and staff being isolated. The city of Lethbridge now has over 500 cases of COVID-19. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says he's concerned about the rising number of those cases. He says if more of us do not adhere to provincial health regulations, more people may die.
Our numbers have gone in the wrong direction compared to those in the province. It's an issue of great concern. And basically, we're pleading with everyone to have the patience, make sure we keep each other safe. Where we're in a situation where we have a significant rise in cases, and we see the variants becoming a significant portion of those cases, we certainly are putting each other at risk, and people may needlessly die if we don't adhere to the Alberta health regulations.
Catch the full interview with Mayor Spearman as he discusses some of the biggest challenges Lethbridge is facing. That's coming up after Business News. Well, now that spring is in the air, Bridge City News spoke to a local pet retailer about some of the most highly sought after pet attire trends for the season. Everything from raincoats to cooling vests, even sunglasses. Here's what they had to say.
We have some fun bandanas for your dog to show off their personality. We have some raincoats because you don't really want a stinky wet dog all the time when it gets rainy, and they like to be out in the rain. So we also love having water toys. Water toys are great because they float and lots of water fun for the dog. There's also frozen bones in the freezers. So a nice frozen bone for your dog is a great way to get them calcium. We like to have a variety of water bottles and water bowls. Just because we are always on the go, wanting to go hiking and just being out and about is fun. But we always have to keep in mind to keep our dog hydrated all the time. It's very important for us, and so it is for them too.
Sure, the calendar says it's spring, but according to one tire expert, it may be too soon to take off your winter tires. Unfortunately, there's no blanket date when Albertans should swap out for summer or all-season radials. The expert's advice? Watch the forecast, and when the weather is currently and consistently over 7 degrees for several days, then you're probably okay to take off the winter tires.
Usually we'll tell people to come in between March and April to switch their winter tires. They're again watching the forecast from your local weather channel. The forecast is what we go by, but usually people will book us in March and April. They'll phone us to book their appointment around those dates within a couple months. And usually we tell people to phone a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance because the bookings can get very busy at that time.
Tire experts say the rubber compound of the winter tire is not meant for warmer weather. It's a softer rubber which wears out a lot quicker and can stretch the braking distance by an extra 26% or more. Junior football began in Alberta in 1873. Now, during that period of time, Lethbridge has never had a team. That meant high school players looking to continue their careers have not had the opportunity to play locally. The Lethbridge Vipers are hoping to make all of that change in 2022. As BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly explains now, it's all about securing the proper funding.
Claresholm, Cardston, Pincher, Raymond, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, you name it, and Brooks, Tabor, everything in between.
Southern Alberta has no shortage of football talent, but players aspiring to advance their football careers haven't had the opportunity to do it from home. The Lethbridge Vipers are in the approval process, but the Canadian Junior Football League's board members say they need to see more corporate sponsorship.
We need to get financial support, but a lot of businesses don't want to support until we're approved, but we can't get approval till we have support.
In the past, the CJFL has seen teams fold after only a few seasons. The pandemic has also provided financial barriers. Startup costs are $100,000. The league estimates a team like Lethbridge would cost up to $200,000 per season.
The process that occurred is absolutely not abnormal. So it wasn't like it was a poor presentation and the support behind it isn't there. Everybody on the board is kind of cheering and hoping this is going to come along. But part of the, if you want to call it tough love process, is what's going on right now.
Management is looking for letters of intent so that the league can see businesses are interested without investing in a team that hasn't yet been approved. General Manager Anthony Parker is optimistic that the Vipers will hit the field in 2022.
There are a lot of people that are very positive about it. So, you know what, that just pushes us to keep going and to make this happen. And I mean, I'm optimistic because I believe in my heart that this is going to happen and that we are going to have a team in the CJFL in 2022.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The Brooks Bombers have decided to cancel its Western Canadian Baseball League 2021 season. Bombers President Jason Wandler says the organization has been connecting with the WCBL for several weeks and came to the conclusion that there were too many obstacles related to the pandemic.
The current border situation, not having American players was a big deal for us. You throw in the fact that, the whole idea of not being able to have fans. I mean, a lot of our revenue is based off ticket sales. So not allowing fans, really cuts into our finances. And then you throw in the fact that we haven't really been able to fundraise or seek sponsorship for the last 13 months has been really disappointing for us because we just don't feel the need to badger businesses that have been hit so hard by the pandemic.
The Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan says it's very concerned how the carbon tax will affect farmers. President Todd Lewis says the Supreme Court ruling yesterday means producers will be competing against jurisdictions that do not have carbon pricing. He says Ottawa should recognize soil conservation efforts such as no-till that farmers have been doing to sequester carbon in the soil since the 90s. Industry experts say a carbon offset system needs to recognize zero-till and continuous cropping as ways of meeting Canada's international climate change commitments. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says he disagrees with the Supreme Court ruling that the federal carbon tax is constitutional. Moe says his province will introduce its own carbon price instead of receiving one from the Trudeau Liberals.
It does not end our opposition to this costly and ineffective tax. And just because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has the legal right to impose a carbon tax, I would say that it doesn't mean that he should. To impose this heavy burden on Saskatchewan without demonstrating that a carbon tax will, in any measurable way, effectively reduce emissions in this province, it's just simply wrong.
Manitoba won't give up the legal challenge of the federal carbon pricing system, despite the recent ruling that it is constitutional. Premier Brian Aleister says his province's case in federal court is different because Manitoba is willing to impose a carbon tax just at a lower rate than what Ottawa had in mind. Aleister says he believes Manitoba has a better case than Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Ontario because it demonstrated its willingness to act on climate change. The opposition NDP says the province should start working with Ottawa instead of fighting it in court. Canada's top doctor says our country is in a tight race between vaccines and contagious variants of COVID-19. Dr. Theresa Tam says daily case counts have increased more than 30% over the past couple of weeks. New federal modeling data shows daily cases of the virus are on the rise. The Public Health Agency says the highest incident rates are among those aged 20 to 39. Tam says the rise in cases among young people is an increasing threat to more high-risk populations.
The total number of cumulative cases of COVID-19 now exceeds 950,000. Active cases have increased to almost 39,000, and increasing variants of concern cases are now accounting for a high proportion of new reported cases in the most heavily impacted provinces. To date, over 7,100 variants of concern cases have been reported across Canada, with the B117 variant accounting for over 90% of these cases.
Earlier this week, we asked you to participate in our poll on our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The question was, do you think the Trudeau Liberals have done a good job during the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, the results are in, and 95% of you said no. Our newest poll question on Monday will be if you agree with the Supreme Court's decision that the federal carbon tax is constitutional. Visit bridgecitynews.ca and let your voice be heard. We had kind of a mixed bag weather-wise today. Some clouds, some sun, a little bit of moisture in certain areas of southwestern Alberta, but a great weekend is shaping up. Full weather details are coming up. It was kind of a cool and cloudy day in Lethbridge today. Jeanette Rocher is back with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, it hasn't felt much like spring lately, but this weekend it'll almost feel like summer.
Yeah, well, that's true, provided that you don't mind the wind, that is, because this weekend we are supposed to have some very strong winds, up to 70 kilometers per hour on Saturday, even though it's looking like a beautiful day is shaping up with the sunshine and 15 degrees. You got to keep in mind that wind, which is probably going to make it feel a lot cooler. Into this evening, we're still looking at a 30% chance of flurries overnight, wind gusts up to 40 kilometers per hour, overnight low 2 degrees. It should be clearing up after midnight, and then, as I was saying, as we get into Saturday, we've got that nice clear blue sky at 15 degrees, but the 70 kilometer per hour winds is kind of kill the fun a little bit. Sunday also looking at some windy conditions as well, mix of sun and cloud at 16 degrees the high, and then something really weird is going to happen. So we're going from a lovely 16-degree day to periods of snow overnight on Sunday evening into Monday, where that snow will continue -2. Look at that drop in temperature right there on Monday. We're going from 16 to -2, and then on to Tuesday, we're going to climb again to 5 degrees. The mercury is going to climb even more to 11 degrees for Wednesday, and then look at next Thursday with sunshine and 17 degrees. So I don't know what's going on. We've got the weather really taking a massive dip. We're playing yo-yo here for sure as we are reaching the end of March, absolutely. But mostly these temperatures are keeping us above the seasonal averages for this time of year. So the average high 8 degrees, average low -5. We're mostly above all of those temperatures. 19 degrees was our high temperature back in 1946. And in 1955, we had the chilliest day on record, which was -24. 7:21 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, 7:53 p.m. So just before 8 p.m., loving these longer days of daylight, making it feel more like summer is coming for sure. Victoria's high tomorrow, 12 degrees, 10 degrees in Vancouver with periods of rain. Should be seeing periods of snow tomorrow in Edmonton and overnight tonight as well. 11 degrees the high there, 11 as well the high for Calgary. And if you want to get away from the wind in Lethbridge, just go to Calgary. Seriously, they're only going to have about 20 km/h winds tomorrow with sunny skies. Sunshine in Saskatoon tomorrow, 6 degrees the high. Periods of snow expected tomorrow in Regina, 4 degrees the high, and a mix of sun and cloud. Mainly overcast though in Winnipeg with 30 km/h winds and a high of 4 degrees. Now over in this area, overnight tonight, Toronto still experiencing the rains. Overcast mainly tomorrow, 10 degrees the high there. Mix of sun and cloud in Ottawa, 11 degrees the high there. 9 degrees in Montreal with a chance of rain. Seeing some precipitation still happening in the Atlantic coast here. Fredericton's high, 1 degree. Halifax, high of 3 degrees with that mix of flurries and showers as well. Same thing for Charlottetown, -1 the high there. Keep in mind, we're going to be expecting 80K winds in Charlottetown and about 70K winds in St. John's, Newfoundland. St. John's also under a winter storm warning. They could expect up to 15 centimeters of the white stuff tomorrow. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Happy Friday. And I believe we have a ski report coming up next.
Today's weather is brought to you by ColumbianDirect.com. Cafe Coffee, specialty coffee from our family to yours. Castle Mountain saw 11 centimeters of new snowfall over the past 72 hours and has an 85 centimeter base. Nikiska received 1 centimeter of snow with a 120 centimeter base. Sunshine Village saw 2 centimeters of fresh powder over the past 72 hours and has a 198 centimeter base. And Lake Louise received 4 centimeters of new snow and has a 150 centimeter base. Mount Norquay has seen 13 centimeters of new snowfall over the past 72 hours, leaving a 127 centimeter base. And in BC, Panorama received 3 centimeters of the white stuff and they have a 52 centimeter base. Fernie saw 6 centimeters of fresh powder with a 77 centimeter base. And Kimberley received 3 centimeters of snow with an 80 centimeter base. And that's a look at your Bridge City News Ski Report.
Westjet announced that it is expanding service in Western Canada just days after it unveiled plans to resume routes to Eastern Canada. The Calgary-based airline is adding 11 new routes across Western Canada amid cautious optimism about summer demand for travel. Company officials say the airline's restart agenda will be pivotal to Canada's economic recovery, with 1 in every 10 Canadian jobs tied to travel and tourism. The new flights are set to begin in June. Shopify lost its crown as Canada's most valuable company. The Ottawa-based technology company's total market capitalization from all classes of shares fell 30% since their peak of just over $1,900 on February 10th. Shopify's total value ended yesterday at $154 billion. Its shares dropped 3.8% to around $1,337 each. Canada's top company, the Royal Bank's total value rose to $165.7 billion after its shares rose to just over $116 apiece. Landlords are negotiating contracts and leases as many of Canada's top real estate markets have shifted in favor of renters during the COVID-19 pandemic. Rentals.ca reports the asking rental price hit $1,714 in February. That is down 6% from the year before. It says the asking price for a one-bedroom rental property in Grande Prairie fell 14.2%, 19.4% in Toronto, and roughly 8% in Quebec City. A panel of U.S. health advisors says an experimental arthritis drug called tanezumab is too risky even with the limits on its use. The panel from the Food and Drug Administration decided the drug's modest benefits did not outweigh the considerable risks. Those risks include joint damage, sometimes requiring knee or hip replacements, nerve damage, and even swelling. Pfizer is seeking FDA approval of the experimental drug for people with moderate and severe arthritis. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 101 points in the day to finish at 18,753. The Dow was up 453 points to 33,073. The S&P 500 was up 65 points to 3975, and the Nasdaq was up 161 points on the day to 13,139. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 225 to 60.81 US per barrel. Natural gas was down a cent to 2.56 US. Gold was up $5.59 to $17.32.52 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged on the day at $25.06 US an ounce. Wheat is at $305 per metric ton, barley's at $315, canola's at $7.81, and corn is at $331 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 55 cents to $120.10, feeder cattle were up 90 cents to $145.13, and lean hogs were up $1.13 to $100.80. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 79.52 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced an extra $33 million commitment to go towards decreasing wait times for both CT scans and MRIs. Government officials say the extra funding will support AHS to perform up to an additional 50,000 CT scans and up to 45,000 more MRI scans throughout the province this year and next. Lethbridge is facing some serious issues, including rising cases of COVID-19. Coming up, a chat with Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman, who tells me if we can expect more restrictions in our city to help deal with the increased cases of the virus. That interview is coming up shortly. Once again, we're delighted to have Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman join us here on the show to talk about some of the current issues happening in the Windy City. Mayor Spearman, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Always happy to talk to you, Hal. Thank you.
Listen, I got to ask you something. Do you ever get used to the wind in the city? I've been here 4 years, man. I'm still not used to it.
Well, we've had some fairly windy days this year, windier than most. I've been here 40 years, and I think a couple of the days when the wind's been over 100 kilometers, even I wasn't used to that. But
Yeah, you know, it's funny. People ask me about the wind here. I say, yeah, usually a Wednesday is about a Category 1, you know, on the hurricane scale, but that's okay. Okay, let's begin the show talking a bit about the letter that was sent out by Justice Minister Casey Medu. The minister says if Chief Shaheen Zadeh, Lethbridge Police Chief, doesn't have a plan in place by mid-April to address the issues at the Lethbridge Police Service, he would potentially dissolve the LPS and bring in another police force. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that our chief is, he's well on the way to having a plan in place. He was working on this before we got the letter from the minister. He and the chairman of the Lethbridge Police Commission had a conversation with the minister before the letter was sent. I also had a separate conversation with the minister, and I have full confidence in the chief and the police commission that they will get it done.
Now, let's talk about something else here. Now, do you want to share any thought on the Alberta legislature voting against the motion to reverse the AHS decision on EMS integrated dispatch? Do you believe it's still possible to potentially make changes on this issue moving forward?
I have to trust in the minister. He's created a committee, a table, he calls it, to discuss the issues. You recognize up to this point, Alberta Health Services denied that there were any issues. When the 4 municipalities submitted detailed technical briefings detailing what the deficiencies were, they still denied that there were issues. We're disappointed in the vote in the legislature, but we believe that was a whipped vote. It was basically the government telling their MLAs not to vote for that motion. So, but we believe that with the minister creating a table to discuss the issues, there is a subtle acknowledgement that the issues actually exist. And we believe that the plan that we've submitted, all 4 municipalities, that we continue to maintain local EMS dispatch, is the most cost-effective service and the most effective service in terms of preventing delays in the event of medical emergencies. So along with that, there is also the injunction case against Wood Buffalo, which we're all waiting to hear what the outcome of that will be. That's not going to be resolved until May. But we all have similar interests.
Now, you actually believe that centralizing this service, the EMS dispatch, is actually putting Albertans' lives at risk? Can you explain?
Well, when there are delays and when all the information isn't transmitted for a response, that can certainly put people's lives at risk. Here in the city of Lethbridge, we've had people sent, ambulances sent to the wrong address. So instead of 22nd Avenue North, it goes to 22nd Avenue South, for example. So that creates a needless delay. When an ambulance shows up at an address and it turns out to be an apartment building and there's no apartment number provided, that creates delays and creates confusion. So yes, those delays need to be avoided. When there's a technical failure of the system and we have to go to manual response, you're relying on people who have good detailed geographical knowledge of the system. So they need to be able to send ambulances to the right locations, and the most effective way to do that is with people who know the area well.
Now let's talk about the rising COVID-19 numbers here in our city. Now you've expressed concern, a lot of people have. What do you think is causing these numbers to rise? And does the city have a plan to maybe implement further restrictions as a result?
Well, we've met with local AHS health officials as City Council. We asked how we could resolve this, and they did say that the major causes of the spread in the Lethbridge area are inappropriate social gatherings, basically people not adhering to the health regulations, and some faith-based communities that are gathering and again not following the Alberta health regulations, and those are the most significant causes of spread. And the numbers are alarming. We have over 500 active positive cases in the city of Lethbridge. Our numbers have gone in the wrong direction compared to those in the province. It's an issue of great concern, and basically we're pleading with everyone to have the patience, make sure we keep each other safe. Where we're in a situation where we have a significant rise in cases and we see the variants becoming a significant portion of those cases, we certainly are putting each other at risk, and people may needlessly die if we don't adhere to the Alberta health regulations.
Now we're all excited to see spring arrive. Let's talk about something a little more positive right now. Can you tell us a bit about the city's outdoor patio and parklet program?
Yep. So we're putting that forward. We help design and help fund the basically the outdoor patios that you see that use city colors. But basically, we cover the fees up to $1,000 of putting out these basically, it covers those fees. We also, if someone wants to design their own patio, they can get funding for up to $5,000 to design and build their own patios if they want a custom built one. But basically, we are covering the fees, and it goes hand in hand with our supporting our businesses in a time when they need to serve customers outside in order to abide by Alberta health regulations for COVID.
Now, City Council recently had a lengthy meeting to discuss the proposed mustard seed dry or sober shelter. I believe it's in the north end of town. The motion to rezone for the shelter was defeated by a 7-2 margin, with only you and Councillor Rob Miyashiro voting for the go-ahead. Why were you in favor of this location?
Well, first of all, I support City Council's decision. So even though I was not on the successful side, I do support what City Council has decided. What I wanted to do was make a vote on principle in that we need this type of service. So the Mustard Seed is a credible organization. They operate in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, other communities, and all those communities say that Mustard Seed has done a great job. The average stay in a mustard seed shelter is 13 days. We in Lethbridge have people staying habitually in our shelter. We need to move people into housing. Very soon we're going to hear complaints from businesses in the city that people are gathering in the downtown, gathering in Galt Gardens. People are staying there overnight. And when they don't have housing, it creates additional problems. So Lethbridge is the only city that is not resolving the homeless situation. Others, I think Edmonton just got approved for 3 supported housing facilities last week. There are supported housing facilities in Red Deer, others being constructed in their downtown. We're making no progress in the city. We all acknowledge that it's a problem, and we need a quality organization like the Mustard Seed with over 30 years experience dealing with the homeless people and with an enviable record of success.
Now, what do you say about the concerns voiced by the business owners in the area that the location would too negatively impact their businesses, much like the previous supervised consumption site?
Well, I think the supervised consumption site and what was being offered are two different things, but I think in order to resolve this in the long term, we need to have services here in the city of Lethbridge that provide housing for homeless people and supports. So those things do have to go forward. In a smaller city, it's going to be more complicated. Do we put these in a residential area? How are people going to feel? No matter where it goes, there are going to be concerns. But in a small city, you're close to everything. So you're going to be close to downtown if it's somewhere else. So when other sites were being examined, there were concerns expressed about that. So how do we get past that in our city, where no matter what site is chosen, there are concerns expressed, because we will never solve the problem if every application results in the same outcome.
Are you actually meeting with maybe some other council members to put a proposal together for the mustard seed saying, how about these three locations, A, B, and C? Perhaps they'll come back?
No, the mustard seed has walked away until we get our act together in the city of Lethbridge. So they've invested over $100,000 so far, exploring solutions, and they're, as they said at the public hearing, that money came from money that had been raised in other municipalities and other locations. They spent $100,000 in Lethbridge and had no way of assisting us. So the next stage, we'll have to see. We'll see if local businesses and local agencies are prepared to work together and try to come up with some solutions. My concern is we might be dealing with organizations that have limited experience doing this, when the mustard seed has extensive experience doing this. Basically, I believe the mustard seed has a bitter taste in their mouth about the way they were received in Lethbridge, and it'll be difficult to entice them back and be part of a solution.
Wow. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney spoke at the recent Rural Municipalities of Alberta Spring Conference, and he made mention that global tech companies have been inquiring about the possibility of opening up digital engineering centers in cities like Lethbridge, right here, potentially creating hundreds of jobs. Can you give us any more details on this possibility?
Well, I'm not aware of any of the specifics of that, and I'm pleased that the Premier's talking positively about the city of Lethbridge. We do have tremendous potential. With a college and a university here, we have a lot of young people, a lot of people who are adaptable. We also have great amenities like the Tech Connect facility that's operated by Economic Development Lethbridge. I think we are well positioned, and we have a low cost of living, we have a great city, and we have a wonderful ability to work together because we're all clustered in a relatively small geographic area. One of the advantages of being in Lethbridge is we all know each other. Many of the leaders in the community, those who might be working with businesses and working with people at the university, we interact on a regular basis. And I think it'd be, we could have an interesting and a really positive impact on new technology coming to this area, engineering technology, and people working together with very good practical applications. I think we have all the assets in place, and we certainly would welcome that type of interest and that type of investment.
You know, you're absolutely right when it comes to getting to know your neighbor. In a smaller city, get to know everybody. Now, the downside is, in a smaller city, if you cut somebody off, chances are you'll see that person again. So you got to be careful, man, when you're out there driving. You know, that could be dangerous.
Yes.
It's like, hey, isn't that... Now, Lethbridge
Yep.
City Council, right? Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to adopt their proposed Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Can you explain what that means in practical terms for future developments here in our city?
Yeah, it's basically a reset. So we look at what we have been doing. What type of parks do we have? How do we maintain them? What do people want to see in the parks? You can't keep putting the same things into parks. I liken it to what we did with swimming pools. So Henderson Lake pool was a traditional type of pool, and we updated it, provided additional amenities. So that's what we've done with the Recreation and Parks Master Plan. The other thing that we've done is we've looked at people using bicycles and wanting to be healthier, the different types of amenities in parks. So you look at Legacy Park, the new regional park in North Lethbridge, and you look at the types of amenities that are being provided there. They're different from what we did with the other two regional parks, and giving people different types of opportunities. So when we build a regional park, for example, we want everybody in the city to use it. So just because it's in the north side doesn't mean that people in the south and people in the west side shouldn't go to Legacy Park, because it has things like an open air theater facility there. So bands can play there. There can be theater productions there. It has amenities that don't exist at the other parks. So similarly, we'd be looking at things like extending bicycle routes, maybe adding bicycle routes on main roads, and exploring other opportunities to expand and appeal to the quality of life in Lethbridge and address the interests of people who like to ride bicycles or like to have other types of features. There are things like an outdoor arena for lacrosse and other sports as well included in that plan. What types of new facilities should we provide to the citizens of Lethbridge?
Now, Lethbridge City Council recently approved the 2021 Public Art Work Plan. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so we set aside 1% of the cost of our capital projects to the Public Art Fund. And what we do is we try to beautify our city and create interest in our city by adding public art. So that 1% goes into a fund, and then recommended projects go forward. And then that whole process involves a request for proposal from artists, and then that those themed projects are bid upon and then eventually built. So we have some great examples of public art in the city, and what it does is it just adds beauty and interest for visitors and people who live here alike.
You know what, I'm a big fan of murals. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see a few more of those as well from some of the local Lethbridge artists. Thanks for your time, Mayor Chris Spearman, Lethbridge Mayor.
Always a pleasure, and have a great weekend. Stay safe, and again, I would appeal to everybody. Please follow the Alberta Health Services guidelines and regulations. We've got to keep each other safe. We've got to be a safe community, and if we do that, our businesses will stay open. If things get out of hand, it's not good for anybody, and the last thing we want to see is a slowdown in our local economy.
In the midst of COVID, some people might be wondering, what is God up to these days anyway? Is he still moving and touching lives? Joining us today from Vancouver Island is Dr. Aleister Petrie, the Executive Director of Partnership Ministries and the author of a new book called God's Footprint on the Land. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Petrie. It's so great to have you on today.
Real pleasure to be with you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So can, first of all, you tell us a little bit about what your ministry is, and also give us a little brief overview of what your book is about.
We've been involved in ministry at different levels since about 1975, 1976, when I was ordained into the Anglican Church at that point. And although I started off my training with broadcasting, asking a lot of questions, that's never left me. So after the formal training for ministry in England, Scotland, and having times of pastoring there and times of pastoring in Canada, we developed what we do now. We began to develop it actually in the late 80s, and then in a more formative way in the mid 90s. And basically, we're a research ministry that loves to go and track the footsteps of God historically and also on a contemporary basis. So when people talk about revival, this is more than a fling up and a hype. This is a concentrated measure of the presence of God permeating a specific area, because the people of that area have met the requirements on God's part to ask his presence to come into that place. 3 questions: why are things the way they are? How did they get like this? What are we going to do about it? So these three questions are all throughout Scripture. And if you go back into the history of revival or an awakening, awakening is when there's never been a revival, those three questions lie behind all that ever actually took place when you have these non-negotiable moves of God, as I say. So they're extremely exciting, but there's a process involved which many people don't really realize.
And this is actually measurable across the world, you say?
Totally.
Interesting.
Absolutely measurable. I mean, we've been doing what we do for many, many years. We probably have about maybe 3,000 or 4,000 cities right now that are in a mode of transformation. Secular news never talks about that because they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the specificities for it, because how do you describe something spiritual that has a tangible physical cause and effect? But behind the scenes, I mean, you're in a broadcast studio, people don't see what's going on behind the scenes. Well, people may see a city in transformation, but they don't realize behind the scenes, there's been a number of factors at work and that continue to be at work for that to occur.
Fascinating. Now, some of what you write in your book may be a bit controversial in that you believe that while most Christians would agree that God owns everything, including the land that we live on, but you also believe that God can curse the land. Can you explain how this works?
Sure. I think we have to reframe the question carefully, that God loves to bless and honor, bring prosperity, provision, direction, and sometimes correction. We need that. Cursing is certainly a biblical word. And if there are issues that are in arrears or contrary to what God wants to do and what God is saying, he can remove his presence from that area. In other words, if we keep on causing conflict and bloodshed, that which is negative and contrary to the character of God, why should he bless that? Therefore, that becomes a rationale and reason as to why so often we see things that are so out of alignment with the character of God. And that's why Scripture says there's going to be a curse. I will remove my glory, my presence, my richness, my character. Why should I co-inhabit with something that's unholy? See, he's given us stewardship. He's given us responsibility. I mean, it's only a short book. It's a book we find people like shorter books now, but it expresses the heart of God that I really want to bless. I really want to heal. I really want to give you breakthrough. But if you don't meet my requirements, then these are non-negotiables, then you won't find my presence in your midst in the way you might want.
Okay, interesting. So that kind of begs the question. We kind of mentioned this in the lead, but do you have any thoughts on what God might be up to allowing something like the COVID pandemic to take place? Is there any spiritual connection here, in your opinion?
100% yes. I mean, we've probably asked that question and have been asked that question for a year from thousands of people around the world. This is probably the most asked question I have these days, probably because plagues, pandemics tend to occur every 100 years or so. And it's at that point, the church can either make a phenomenal set of inroads for the purpose of God, or it can look at the problem and go into disarray and reaction. In other words, can we respond to what's happening? So we always like to ask the Lord, why are things the way they are? Lord, uncover what's going on. Luke 8, Hebrews 4. Will you disclose the reason for why things are? Look, we have followed this principle for 30, 35 years, and we've never found it wanting at all. So when there's something like illness, any form of illness in an area, or barrenness, or something like this, for example, we will go and ask the Lord, what have we done, or what has been done that has caused conflict in the spirit realm and the physical realm? The reason this may be controversial is we don't think spiritually very much in the Western world, where in fact it's non-negotiable for the rest of the world. So as I often say, how's your 2020 worldview vision? And if you think the way most of the world thinks, Scripture is very clear. What goes on in the spirit realm has a cause and effect upon the physical realm.
So how should we be responding to it?
But well, basically for the COVID, I look to see what may in fact have occurred. Are we in an end time scenario? Are we in the scenario that there's people manipulating us? It could well be, but I also look to see what exactly has been occurring in terms of within the church, because the church is always the sign of the kingdom of God. And if things aren't going well in the church, you can be sure the conflict in there is indicative of something that God is trying to fine tune. I've been mentoring a former gang leader who is now a Pentecostal and Anglican pastor, something like on my DNA. And when he saw this, his question was the same, Lord, what do we do? And he began to recognize that when we work in the power of the opposite spirit, you are putting into disarray these issues that would try and so challenge us and take us out. So he has now, in 1 year, managed to foster hundreds of thousands of people who otherwise would never have had access to the church. Fed them, clothed them. He gets £100,000 a week from a month from a local grocery store. As he's moved into these areas of unchurched people, not only has COVID been removed and people have been healed, tens of thousands have come to Christ. It's called moving in the power of the opposite spirit. And it is all to do with the fear of the Lord. So when there's a pandemic, usually for me, it's a wake-up call. Something bigger is going on. And you can't just pray at it and it goes away. I mean, I've asked many leaders that question. Have you been praying at it? Yeah. Has it gone away? Nope. But are you praying into it? Are you asking God for his counsel as to why things are the way they are and how they got like that? And of course, part of the problem is if people don't know how to listen to the Lord, even collectively, then you won't get very far. So COVID actually, for me, while it's horrific, I don't like it, and there's loads of conspiratorial things. For me, it's a cause to pray intercessorily. And that's what you find, for example, in Psalm 25:14. If you have the fear of the Lord in you, he will give you counsel. He will give you insight. He will give you direction. I mean, that's beautiful. So it removes the horror of the pandemic, but brings you into the intimacy of God, who say, work with me, and I will give you boundaries and parameters and insight and understanding. And yes, people are healed. The pandemic can be removed, at least in certain areas where people are praying in the way that God requires of them. Yeah.
Now, Dr. Petrie, let's get to your book for a minute here. You have some stories in your book where people have prayed over their unproductive land and maybe repented for their sins. And then there was what you're calling a healing on the land. So it had actual tangible turnaround results. So maybe can you share one of those stories?
Well, there's several stories. Gosh, the beauty of stories is they equip people for an awareness of what could be. Farmland, I do come from a farming background years ago. Farmland is very real, but it can be a city, it can be a road, can be a street, can be a house. But in some of the case stories that I've shown here, where there's been absolutely no productivity on the land, the grain is seeded, but there's no harvest. There's very bad relationships with people on the land, constant fighting, constant sickness, all those issues. As prayer is brought into those areas through diagnostic research, like finding out, has there been conflict on that land? Has there been theft? Why is there barrenness? Why is there estrangement? Why are the animals always dying prematurely? Then we do our conductive research. And research is scriptural. Numbers 13, Joshua 18, right through the Bible. When God says, it's not God doesn't know, we don't know. He wants us to be informed with what actually has taken place. Again, spiritual cause and effect. So in one case, we prayed that way, and suddenly the productivity came back 3 or 4 times fold within that season. People's estrangements were healed. Wild animals like caribou, deer, that they all came back. The land, to this day in that area, you can sense the presence of God when you go near it. But we've seen this countless times in cities, entire cities that had very bad decisions made for the city. And so the collective prayer people, pastors, leaders in kingdom business came together and repented before the Lord. What have we done wrong? And I've given a case story of that when the fishing industry went down the tube and the tourist industry was almost destroyed. And to the effect that people came and repented of their wayward ways and decisions that had been made contrary to God's design in that city. Wow, everything. Schools began to rebuild. The salmon came back. I mean, this is totally scriptural. And if you don't think it's not, it's because we've lowered our expectation of what God is like. And God is not a God in the hip pocket. He is the creator God. So he has requirements. So this city and many other cities that we work with, we've watched the flourishing of, is it perfect? No, but it's so different than the way it was before. And he asks us to guard and to guard, keep and occupy, to steward it, to steward the things. And these such cities are absolutely reflecting the purposes of the glory of God.
Fascinating. Dr. Petrie, it looks like we are about out of time, but it's such an interesting topic. We could almost go on all day. But we thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Aleister Petrie is the Executive Director of Partnership Ministries and the author of a new book, God's Footprint on the Land. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.